when I went through.
City clerk.
Yeah.
Had a big bump. I won't be able to reach the microphone. These microphones are far.
I know.
But maybe they
thinking about
catch.
going up there just because it's weird, like presenting.
Yeah, me too, but I don't, there's like not a microphone.
You know who I see?
Bill.
I got this email from
I don't,
I gave you the pointer up there,
Over
and
and
I
over.
checked
So look
it,
at
so I'll
my
put your
response.
PowerPoint up, so you
I-
should be able to,
Did they
Yeah.
respond to
Point
your
and click.
response?
No,
just, yeah.
but I'm still laughing.
and I'm
And I
gonna just
think
gonna
you
hop in from here because I don't see.
All right, I have
anything
6
other than
o'clock.
me
We'll go
standing
ahead
right
and get
next to you.
started.
Is it-
And first up, we have the land use application processes.
All right. Woohoo! Everybody excited for this? I'm so stoked. Yeah. All right. Evening.
That wasn't
Mayor and
genuine,
Council.
by the way.
Oh, it was. It was. I just needed to pump up the energy in here a little bit. Everybody's favorite topic, land use applications and such. We wanted to just kind of give a bit of a land use 101 work session for council since there have been a number of questions that have popped up, over the last several months. We recognize that, to the best of my knowledge anyways, nobody on council has had the pleasure of being on planning commission and, doing deep dives into land use applications in the past. And because, well, one, we anticipate seeing probably a good chunk of land use applications coming our way in 2025, probably around the lowering of interest rates and everything else that we have seen. And then lastly, as a bit of a primer for the updated land use code. So everybody can understand sort of where we are at today with our current land use code and how the processes work and how that may change moving forward with the new land use code. So I'm going to see if I can actually make this work. And of course,
Push the,
hey, there it is. I got it.
There you go.
Right on. So, yeah, I just kind of explained, some of the reasons that it is important for council to understand. And I'm going to move into some of the basics that we hope to cover here, just so by the end of this meeting, or perhaps at least at the end of maybe a second meeting, which we may or may not need to do, everybody understands, first and foremost, what a land use application is and how that differs from a building permit application. That may not be readily apparent to everybody. What is use by right? What do we mean by it when that term comes up? What are development permits and entitlements? And finally, what role does the land use code play both today and potentially in the future? So start off with use by right, because this requires sort of the least amount as far as processing on part of the city. If a particular use is use by right, an example would be a single-family home in our R2 medium-density residential zone district, then no separate land use applications are actually needed. You can come in, you've got a lot, you want to build a single-family home there, you just bring a building permit application in to us at Community Development and Planning, and we will start reviewing that. Now, of course, that particular unit needs to meet all our zoning regulations through the application, the site plan that you provide, and any other plans that go with that. So that applies height limits, density requirements, setback, lot coverage, and so on and so forth. So those are the sort of things that my staff is looking for when a building permit comes in, because this is use by right. You can do it, but you still need to meet those requirements.
And Bill, how would someone know what a use by right is if they look at chapter 16 of our municipal code?
In chapter 16, and I will get to the use table, but we do have it listed there for what is permitted outright. It's currently designated with a P under that specific zone district. So we kind of go to that chart and figure out if what is being proposed is allowed outright there. So in Salida, our staff reviews those building permits for the zoning requirements that I was talking about for the public utility connections to sewer and water. And then, of course, we put together what the relevant fee requirements would be so that the applicant has a sense of exactly how much they'll be paying in order to build or process whatever it is they have proposed. Once community development staff has done their review, we then forward that application on to Chaffey County. We have an IGA.
Which is always the bottleneck. 2 miles
Right,
from the back.
never in my office. But we have an IGA with the county where they review building permits for structural purposes. And they also do the inspections around structures.
So they serve as this, right, currently the city's building department. We delegate it to them. It's outside of them also being the county. It's more that you could delegate your building department services to anyone. You could delegate, you could have it in-house, you could delegate to a third party, or in this case, because the IGA that Bill mentioned, it's to the Chaffey County.
Yep, so we have that relationship with them, and prior to certificate of occupancy, which means, of course, that you can actually move in if it's residential, you can begin using that place as a place of business. City staff conducts our own inspections for zoning compliance, landscaping, the water and sewer connections, et cetera. So we make sure that everything that was promised on that site plan has actually been built and that it's ready to be able to move into. Once all inspections are passed on the county side and on the city side, and all the fees are paid unless there's, special arrangements, then a building will receive its certificate of occupancy.
From who?
From the county. Technically, it actually comes from the county. We give our sign off, they issue the CO. Okay. All right, so that covers the use by right when no additional land use applications are needed. What if something is not used by right? That's when the land use applications kick in, right? The city has the right per the state constitution to regulate land use and subdivision of land throughout its city limits. If it's not used by right, you can't come in and submit a building permit for that. You need to go through the process and get the approvals for that development permit that comes with all the entitlements for that particular use. Some examples of land use application types include both minor and major subdivisions, planned developments, rezonings, site plan reviews for apartment buildings, lot line adjustments to plats or even elimination of lot lines. We do variances, conditional use permits, right-of-way vacations, large alterations to large buildings, and changes of use. And I have that one starred because it's technically not formalized within our land use code, but it is a process that we engage in with the county per the IGA to let them know that it is an allowable use or not.
Could you speak just for a minute on which of these would be quasi-judicial in nature?
Nina's going to probably have a
you're gonna do that
better
later?
sense of that one specifically.
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to talk about quasi-judicial in our city council handbook discussion, but most of these are quasi-judicial because quasi-judicial is when it relates to a specific property. And as far as I can tell, this is someone applying for an application to use their property in a certain way, and it's applying what's in our chapter 16, what's in our code to the specific property. So all of these would be quasi-judicial.
Nice. Okay. Like I said, change the use is something we're going to actually update that in the new code as well and kind of formalize that particular one. This is just an example. There's certainly other ones out there. Here are some other application types that we see through our department, both certificate of approvals, basically the ability to build within the downtown historic district, and landmark designations go at least partly through the Historic Preservation Commission and are initially processed by my department. Text amendments, code text amendments, which have been out in front of you all before, annexations, which you have seen before, sign permits and creative signs, which can go through different types of processes, but are not technically land use specific. So we'll take a little break. Here's a nice pretty picture, catch your attention.
I would prefer
stretch.
something high alpine.
This is all the dust and sand that, blows up against the edge of my house in current, spring windy conditions and all. It also might be a photo that I took from the top of High Dune out there in Great Sand Dunes a long time ago.
Nice.
All right,
That's great.
Looks like you might have a drainage issue.
back to the fun stuff. So you guys are so excited about what we're talking about right now, and I know you really want me to tell you a lot more, so I'm going to. There are three primary types of land use applications that we see, and we kind of put them in these three buckets. We have administrative reviews, which I've also included administrative conditional uses into. This is where staff is the one who reads the code based off of what the particular proposal is. We use that use table in a lot of cases to determine that it is an administrative review, and then we issue a decision based off of the information in front of us. Again, what's important is that we base that decision off of actual language, specific language that is in the land use code. We're not technically allowed to stray from that unless it is a negotiated process, for instance. The next type of land use application process is the limited impact review. This, I also lump in conditional uses because it goes more or less through the exact same process. Conditional uses are just site-specific proposals where there may be additional conditions that need to be put onto the proposed development to reduce potential impacts that may be out there. And this is also called out in the use table, which I'll show you in a minute. In this particular case with limited impact reviews, staff is the first filter to go through and we'll review it and provide a report and sometimes a recommendation to Planning Commission, who then holds a public hearing and issues a decision. Again, that decision shall be based off of the language within the land use code. Then lastly, major impact reviews, in which same thing, staff reviews it first, provides a report to Planning Commission, who holds a public hearing, and then issues a recommendation to this body, to City Council, who will then hold a public hearing of their own, and then can issue a decision. Of course, there's other options, including a continuation and whatnot, but once a decision is made, that shall be made based off of language of the land use code. So I'm gonna go into each of these a little bit more detail. But first, this is what I call the almighty use table. This is kind of where we go when somebody asks us, hey, what do I need to do in order to build this? Or start up this particular type of a business. This is just an example of one page of several pages of uses that we have in the land use code. And I've circled the three primary types: the administrative review, the limited impact review, and a major impact review. In this case, for instance, an accessory dwelling unit. It's an administrative review across the board in all zone districts. So we're really comparing that use to the zone district. Residential for between 5 and 19 units, let's say a 12-unit apartment complex. Well, in the R2, that would be a limited impact review. That means it goes to Planning Commission for a decision. And then if that apartment building was, say, 30 units, anything 20 or more, in the R2 or R3 and really all the rest of the zone districts with the exception of R1, that would go to all the way to City Council to make a decision at this point with our current code.
Bill, can you go back to the use table?
Yep.
So before someone even comes to the use table, they would look at the zoning map to see what their property was designated. So if you would, that's how you'd figure out, okay, that's where I live, and it'd be this color, and then you're like, okay, I'm R1, I could build a residence permitted as of use by right, just to go more basic.
Yep. And we have the most current zoning map available here in City Hall and in our department. The one on the web right now is a little bit behind. We need to update that. We're in the process of doing that actually with our GIS folks. But if anybody ever has questions about what zone district they're in, they can always call us and we can verify for them.
Was that with the Jedis or the GIS?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I heard Jedi.
Jedi GIS, one and the same, basically. And they do true Jedi work. It's pretty amazing. Okay, so some examples of administrative reviews and the types. And again, it depends on the zoning districts. Smaller multifamily apartments, everywhere except for the R1 zone is allowed. Administrative variances, somebody wants a 8-foot fence, for instance, instead of a 6-foot fence on their side yard. They would come to staff or ask that. Non-residential or mixed-use buildings, less than 20,000 square feet, minor plat amendments, lot line adjustments or eliminations. If somebody is building a duplex and they want to put a lot line between those to make them 2 saleable lots, or for instance, a daycare center in the downtown central business district, that is considered a administrative conditional use. So we would potentially put specific conditions on to that. That process, the administrative review process, and this is a vast oversimplification of the process, but really for time constraint purposes, I'm going to go through it relatively quickly. Developer puts together and submits plans. Those plans can vary as to the magnitude of what is required, but often they have site plans at the very least. They may have civil engineering documents. Sometimes they have traffic analyses. That's generally in the limited impact or major impact process, but we see a variety of different plans and documents that come in as part of these applications, along with our own application forms that we ask them to fill out. Staff reviews these plans and the application for completeness. No buttons get pushed to start moving forward until it has been deemed complete. If after it has been submitted, staff determines it's not complete, they will talk to the applicant and request the additional information. And then applicant submits that information. Once we have everything that we need in order to be able to make a decision, staff deems that application complete, finishes the review, may shoot that application out to other departments, to Public Works or to Fire, just to make sure that they're good with it under their own code or requirements rather. And then staff issues a decision, and that approval may include specific conditions. Fairly straightforward, sometimes gets a little complicated, but generally these are the fastest form of land use processes. Limited impact reviews. Again, it depends rather on which zone district you're in as to what level this goes to. But some examples we have are variances, which are actually reviewed by our Board of Adjustment, which is our planning commission in another capacity. Non-residential or mixed-use buildings that are between 20,001 square feet to 50,000 square feet. Large alterations, especially to commercial buildings. Minor subdivisions, which are the subdivisions of 5 or fewer lots from one single parcel, and conditional use permits such as downtown street patios, adult novelty shops in the C1 or C2 areas, which are the only places that they're allowed. We don't have too many conditional uses as they are called out in the use table currently in our current code, but that may change with the new code. So, what's the process? If you're a developer and you want to do something that requires a limited impact review, the first thing that you need to do is to request a pre-app conference with staff. That if it's a fairly simplistic proposal, very straightforward, it may just include planning staff. However, in most cases, we also get the other departments involved, especially fire department, public works, sometimes parks. We will have the applicant put together those initial concept plans, provide a summary of what they want to do, and submit that information in time for the pre-app conference. And then we get everybody together and we sit down, generally in the Methodist Mountain Room, and talk through the plans and the ideas. And then staff's job is to identify any major concerns that we may have, point out any studies that may need to be done, for instance, give folks a summary of what the fees are that they might expect to see, and what the process is going forward. we report out with a summary of the conversation as well. So more often than not, the developer needs to go back to the drawing board at least to some degree after these conversations, because there's refinement that needs to happen. There may be a significant red flag, or just other issues that need to be addressed. So sometimes we'll have these pre-app conferences. We provide the developer with all the information they need of what we need to see before we have a complete application. And we may not hear back from them for months, sometimes even years. But in a perfect world, we get that all back to us fairly quickly, and it's all complete. We got everything that we need. At that point, a public hearing date with Planning Commission gets set. That's generally anywhere between 1 and 3 months ahead of the date when we actually have a complete application. Really depends on the number of projects that are in the queue with Planning Commission at that point, because at this stage, Planning Commission only has one regular monthly meeting, one regular meeting per month, rather. Sometimes we will convert a work session into a regular meeting if we have a lot of things kind of stacking up on the agendas. After that point, staff will begin its review and send the application out for referrals to other department staff and utility providers and others. There's noticing that's done for the public hearing with Planning Commission, and it's done in 3 ways. It's put into the newspaper, it's sent out to neighbors within 175 feet of the subject property, bless you. Thank you. And it's also posted on site, and we have rules around all of that. In some cases, there may need to be some additional revisions to the plans, whether it's requested on behalf of the applicant to update it or by staff. Staff then gets that information, writes up a staff report for Planning Commission, which may include any recommendation of conditions, any written public comments that we have received in response to the noticing that has been done. And then we submit all that information to the applicant and to the Planning Commission, and we make that publicly available on our website. At that point, Planning Commission then reviews that report, reviews the application and all its contents, hopefully well in advance of the meeting, and then a public hearing is held at whatever time that it got set for, and Planning Commission issues that decision. If that proposal is approved, then the applicant has certain entitlements for that property to be able to do what they have proposed. In many cases, when there's subdivision involved, there's public improvements involved, or there's inclusionary housing involved, we have additional agreements that still need to be written up and signed by both the city and the developer. And then once we have those agreements, we generally bring those forward together with the plats or plans over to the county to get them recorded, and everything is final, and they're allowed to move forward with the project. Okay, another little interlude.
What questions does everyone have
Yeah.
so far?
Good point to bring that up.
You know, it's a lot. We want to make sure we're answering or addressing like what you
Are
actually.
you going to send these slides to us so we can have them?
Certainly.
I'm just curious, does anyone have any questions regarding the role of Planning Commission in this process? Because, I mean, a lot of times by the time it gets to us, they've spent countless hours on something. So I just think it's really important to recognize that.
And I think their role is very similar to ours. It's not what you want to do. It's what the law allows you to do. You know what I
I
mean?
mean, the code.
Well, yeah. And so you can't just make decisions because, yeah, let him do it, but no, he can't do it. No, it's all by the book.
And then that kind of gives them ideas for what they want to recommend to change the code in the future. Like if something keeps coming up that it's like, ooh, this is not what we intended. And obviously you're going through the land use code rewrite now, but yeah, to your point, it's when you're there, you're applying the code, but then before the land use code process, they used to have, maybe once a year, they would have a list, and we would say, keep a running list, and then they would say, okay, well, can we talk about how we think the code should be updated, because we found out that maybe it didn't work the way it was supposed to. But to your point, Elise, and I was gonna also talk about this in the next, when we talk about quasi-judicial, everyone has notice of Chapter 16. When you purchase a property, you look at all these, you look what's in the code, and you have notice as to what is permitted onto your property and what isn't. The Planning Commission is in statute, every municipality should have one, and their main job is to adopt the comprehensive plan, which dictates what you're saying as a city you want to see in the community. And then from there, you write your land use code and then you apply it. So yeah, they are so well versed in not only the applications that are in front of them, but in the land use code, in how things could be updated, and they take that time. That's why you appoint them there. They grow that expertise if they don't already have it from they probably 4 to 6 hours a month, just their meetings, judging by the time I see them. So yeah, by the time it gets to city council, their recommendations are there. We're adding that, either in the minutes or in the staff report. Important things are in it. It helps guide what should be in the staff report, what should be in front of you. They have their own public hearing, but then you have all that information in the packet, and it helps inform you as well, at all the volunteer work that they're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Nina, for bringing up the comprehensive plan too, because, really, Planning Commission and to an extent, council, when a decision comes in front of you, you're implementing the comprehensive plan through those decisions. So that's one of their most valuable roles.
Are those typically 10-year plans, the comprehensive plans?
Yeah, it does vary. Some areas do it more frequently depending on, growth that's happened. Some do it less frequently if there hasn't been much growth or not much change. But anywhere between, I think, 7 and probably 15 years is pretty typical. Right now, we are getting up there. Ours is 11 years old as of this point. So just for reference.
Bill, really quick. The Board of Adjustments, you said that it's pretty much the same thing as a planning commission, but a different capacity. Can you?
You want me to answer?
Yeah, please.
So that's also in statute. So you as a city could appoint a separate board of adjustment like other cities do, but since you're so small, the planning commission right now acts as the board of adjustment. But I've given them trainings where I tell them, like, if you're planning commission, this is what you do, and when you're board of adjustment, this is what you do. So when you're a board of adjustment, I always tell them, like, think of you're putting a different hat on. And it's mostly variances. And variances are granted in very rare circumstances. But it's appropriate that you have your planning commission acting as your board of adjustment. That does happen in smaller communities. So it's a separate entity that is authorized by statute.
And there's a very strict set of criteria for that as well that we have to determine whether or not the variance should be approved.
And a variance is something where you're altering what is in your code. So that's why it's so rare, because it's only under very, very certain circumstances, which comes from statute and also case law, which is similar throughout the state and also the nation in terms of how the limited circumstances you grant variances, maybe because of sloping or odd-shaped lots, and that you're asking for a slight remedy or a slight relief from the land use code.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, last one, major impact reviews. Just some examples of that would be apartment units with more than 20 units in it, for instance. Again, this would require a major impact review in all zone districts except for R1 where it is not allowed. Non-residential or mixed-use buildings over 50,001 square feet, all planned developments, which is, variances on steroids, basically, right? To be able to do something much, much larger with a ton of deviations to the code within it. Rezonings, if you're looking to have something either applied after a new annexation or rezoned from one zone district to another. Right-of-way vacations, when we're basically giving up any public right-of-way to the surrounding properties, and major subdivisions. This process follows a similar path to the limited impact reviews, but has more to it. It's beefed up. For one, a developer by the code shall engage in a joint conceptual review in front of council and planning commission, generally at the same time. And that actually comes after they've already done their pre-application conference with staff, but before their official submittal of the application. With a major impact review, instead of planning commission issuing the decision, they actually issue a recommendation to this body. Sometimes following planning commission meetings, there can be a lot of questions that come up, a lot of conditions. And so we often see a bit of a pause that's put on between that planning commission recommendation and bringing it forward to council as they update certain things. And as long as the proposal is generally the same as it was, we don't require them to go back through the process, but we move it forward and give you all ample information to know what has changed and how that impacts the recommendations made by planning commission or staff. So following any particular updates that the developer might make, a council hearing is then set. And that's generally anywhere between maybe 2 and 6 months after the planning commission recommendation. Really depends on the amount of updates and corrections that are made, the number of projects ahead of them in the queue, and other factors. 6 months may be on the longer side, as long as there are not a lot of significant updates to be made. And then the resolution or ordinance, depending on the particular type of proposal, is drafted by planning staff or the city attorney's office. Noticing is done for, of course, that public hearing as well, in those 3 different ways that I mentioned before. And then just like with planning commission, staff writes up a staff report for city council, and which will include any recommendations that are made by planning commission, including any recommended conditions of approval. The report will include any written public comments. This is, again, submitted to the applicant and to city council, and then again made publicly available online. If it is an ordinance, and Nina can correct me if I'm wrong, there is almost always a first reading that's held with council by state statute. Council will hear it. It's an opportunity to ask some, basic questions, big picture questions, not really meant for getting down into the nitty gritty per se, but really to help you to digest what is in front of you, really. And then the public hearing is held with public input. That's generally at a second reading rather, at which you would generally issue a decision, again, based off of the requirements of the land use code, the language that's in the code. If it is approved, the applicant has certain entitlements that for use of the property. And again, just like with certain limited impact reviews, there may be certain agreements. Almost always with major impact review, there's going to be either a subdivision improvement agreement, a development improvement agreement, and or inclusionary housing agreements. And then again, once those agreements are signed, they are recorded with the relevant plats or plans. And in the case of a resolution, it's effective immediately. In the case of an ordinance, it is effective, Christy, 30 days
30 days after publication.
after publication in the paper. So often that means a little bit more than 30 days after the actual approval. So
And that's after the second reading.
after the second reading.
And that's because you're a statutory city. If you were home rule, you could decide it could be 5 days, it could be immediately.
Just some other application type processes. Again, I mentioned them: certificate approval, landmark designation, text amendments, annexation, sign permit, creative signs. Of all those, the text amendments and annexations are the most cumbersome. Needs to go through planning commission and on to you all as well. They're just not technically land use applications per se. They're more regulatory. So one thing that I wanted to give everybody a bit of a heads up with is, we've got this new land use code being proposed. We've been working on it for quite a while. And this has been out in front of the public before with other versions of, or installments of the code. We're hoping to get a public draft, as I've mentioned before, out into the public by the end of this year. We're still working really hard for that. These are the proposed changes to how we currently run these land use application processes. So instead of having administrative review, limited impact review, major impact review, we would drop everything into 5 separate buckets. And they would be labeled under ordinance amendments, development permits, subdivisions, historic preservation, and modification. It may seem a little bit more complicated because there are more buckets, but in a lot of ways, it helps clarify exactly what the process is going to be. These, and it includes not just land use types, but also subdivisions and other processes that aren't necessarily a land use. So under ordinance amendments would include rezoning, plan developments, code text amendments, and annexations. Development permit processes would include minor site plans and major site plan reviews. The thresholds are proposed to change. So if you look at our land use code table, for instance, I'm gonna go back to that. Whoops, sorry. Not sure what I just did. Can you get me back into the slideshow, Christy? Yeah. Okay, so right now, you've got, for instance, the residential 5 to 19 units for R2 zone district going to Planning Commission, and anything over 20 units going all the way to City Council. One of the conversations that was had really early on in the land use code process with developers had to do around how the processes can just be really long and pretty difficult for them, and not to get an answer as quickly as they would like. And so our consultants at Clarion have proposed that we bump some of those thresholds up. So some things that used to be limited impact review in front of Planning Commission would go to staff, and virtually everything on the development side that goes to council now, that's short of an ordinance or short of any sort of public dedications, would be decided at the Planning Commission level. So you're putting more decision-making power into the Planning Commission's hands, as they're the ones who tend to focus on these land use issues the most. Get back to that real quick.
And so that was a message you heard pretty loud and clear from the development community?
We did. It's, about streamlining, I went the wrong direction. Streamlining the processes and trying to reduce the number of public hearings to some regards, but still having them, of course.
And that, just to piggyback on that, that's probably the reason why I asked the question is, it saves applicants time, it saves them money, gets them developing quicker. I actually rewrite a lot of land use codes in my, in Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and that's always what people are asking for, like to streamline the process, to have less steps, less public hearings, still have, like Bill said, still have a public hearing, but not that they're going through all, and all these different steps. And from hearing a few of you, that's something that you're craving for as well. So I'm really excited about what Clarion's doing with our land use code, with your land use code.
Thanks.
Just a couple of the other ones that would fall under development permits would include conditional uses and changes of use. Then we'd have a separate category for subdivisions, minor subdivisions, major subdivisions, condos, and vacations. One big change to this. Currently, when we process subdivisions, when people want to divide up their land, we have it with a kind of an all-in-one concept at this point. You need to come forward with all the drainage information, all the civil information, developers are paying literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to come up with this information from their surveyors, their engineers, and other consultants on these projects before they even know if you're all on board with that type of subdivision. That can be a huge risk on the development community. A lot of communities, and I probably would say most communities, do engage in what's called a preliminary plat and final plat process for their larger subdivisions. That is what is being proposed in the new land use code. That folks can come forward with a generic conceptual idea with, certain information called out and certainly surveys as a part of it, and propose a subdivision, go through the process, go to planning commission to find out if it's even going to be allowed before they go back to the engineers, to the consultants and others to ask for all the detailed drawings that would be need to understand, what are the elevation of the roads, of the utility lines, all that information that needs to be eventually figured out, but they would at least get an answer ahead of time as to whether they can be moving forward, provided that they get all that engineering information. So that is being proposed in concert with a final plat process. So once they get that preliminary plat approval, however many months down the line, even years down the line, they could come and submit a final plat application. We would have some limitations to how long they'd have that preliminary plat approval before they had to come forward with the final plat. But it should streamline the process for developers and hopefully make it more affordable for them to do, especially if they're heading down the wrong path in the first place. As I mentioned, condos and vacations as other types of subdivisions. Historic preservation, again, these are things that would go to Historic Preservation Commission. In the case of the landmark or district designation, that would then still come here to City Council for ultimate approval. And then various types of modifications, including variances, minor modifications that could be done at the administrative level, and any sort of appeals. So these are the new baskets that we're talking about for the new land use code, and hopefully clarifying some things out there and streamlining it in other ways. So does anybody have any questions?
So where do we stand with the new land use code? Not to put too much pressure on you.
Yeah, we are right now dealing with the minutia of language, because I think any developer, any planner would be able to tell you the key is in the language being clear, because anytime it's not clear, it causes issues for everybody. And the way that one person reads a particular clause may be very different from how somebody else does. So we're trying our best as staff to go over it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure it's clear that which is on page 17 and refers to something that's on page 326 lines up appropriately. And still working with our consultant on certain sections where a little bit of information is still needed. And other staff here internally as well. So we have a little bit more to do, but we are actually aiming to have the staff draft back to our consultant this week. Wow. And then they would take our edits that we've been making over the last several weeks, incorporate that into one new draft that we can then hopefully put out in front of the public by the end of the year.
Great.
So
Thank you.
it's a lot. It's several hundred pages long, and every single word counts. May versus shall, and versus or, et cetera, et cetera.
It probably wouldn't be a good idea to have "it depends" in there.
Yeah, that we try to avoid that one. Yeah. I do a search for "it depends" and just delete.
Any and all vagary.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop here. And see if there's any other questions that come up or anything that's lingering in your mind, or, anything about these particular land use types that you want to know more about.
Bill, talk about code text amendments. Give me an example of that, because it's just,
Inclusionary housing, for instance, our inclusionary housing code that's in the land use code.
Okay.
Remember a couple years ago, we made some changes to, say, the AMIs that were applicable. That language is in the code. So in order for that to change, it has to go through that text amendment process, which goes in front of Planning Commission if it has to do with Chapter 16, which is the land use code, for their recommendation, and then eventually comes to you all. It's changed via ordinance. So there's that 30-day effectiveness.
I would just say, clearly, the big takeaway is there's a lot to this process. There's a lot of complexity. And anything we can do to simplify and clarify for the people that are taking a lot of financial risk is really important.
Yeah. We recognize that, and we want to do what we can. The current code, I wouldn't say it's horrible by any means, but it's outdated. It references a different era in Salida's growth. There are a lot of inconsistencies, and, it's been piecemealed. There've been a lot of these code text amendments that have happened, outside of the context of the entire document. So that's why it's so important every once in a while to really start new. Take a lot of the stuff that you have in the current code if it's working, but then really reformat the whole thing, reorganize it, and try to create something that is going to work for everybody, including staff. We need to make it easy for us to figure out where everything is and how to give that information to the public. Nina, did you have anything else you wanted to?
And I think it would be hard, it'd be hard pressed to think about how much time we spent here addressing different interpretations, or just some sort of way of reading that just hadn't been considered before.
Yeah.
So much time just for that alone. So having everything as just dialed in and just not up for interpretation is so key, and yet so incredibly difficult.
It is. We literally will spend hours going through these sentence by sentence, 2 or 3 of us at a time, and we each can read it a little bit differently, and we find ourselves after 3-4 hours, we've gone through literally 2 or 3 pages. And it's that just mind-numbing. Yeah, that's what I got.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Thank you all.
Thanks for making it fun. You made it fun. I had a good time.
Well, I don't have
I
any
hope
pictures this
Nina
time.
has pictures.
Yeah, did you break it up with fun slides
Yep.
of a vacation?
I'm not quite sure how to follow that. It's riveting,
Riveting.
riveting.
Did you bring slides from a vacation of some
I
kind?
did not bring slides from a vacation. Okay. I'll hit my button, thinking that I'm moving the slide, and then you can hit it. Okay, cool.
In the corner of our eye.
So, remember this. Yes, it's super exciting.
Spoke about during the retreat.
We did, and the council adopted it earlier this year. And you all were so young and new to this city government thing that we thought that we would just have an overview of the handbook, kind of refresher course now that you have been involved in this work for a little while. I'm sure questions have come up for you. So we're going to talk about this. So the purpose of the handbook is really to help you all understand what your responsibilities are, what the responsibilities of the appointed position, so the 3 of us sitting up here, what our relationship is with you all as well. Look at what meeting procedures and communicate legal requirements to you, and then provide resources to you. This is a big job. You all have day jobs as well. So as I said, day jobs, as I said when I worked for DOLA, you don't have to know everything. That's not your responsibility, right? There are groups in the state that are wonderful resources. Your staff is a great resource for you, so you don't have to know everything. You have to know who to ask. So, and the handbook is a good place to start. So, we are not going to go through all 11 chapters of the handbook. I have picked out some pieces that you're welcome very much. But this, if you need a quick guide to it, this is what your handbook covers.
All right. So chapter 1 is an intro to city government. You have your mission up here, which is one that the council has approved for a couple of years now. So it's a mission of the Salida City Council to guide the city through constructive, thoughtful, and inclusive decision-making, preserving what makes Salida unique, and focusing on the most positive outcomes. And I think you all do that very well. So just a reminder that you have set this up. In general, governments across Colorado are primarily responsible for 3 main categories of activities: health and safety, police, fire, roads, water, right? Safe drinking water, protecting our groundwater. That's health and safety activities. Welfare of our communities, parks, recreations, museums, libraries, housing, and housekeeping, such as property ownership. We keep track of who owns what parcel of land. We collect taxes. We hold elections. Some local governments, report death and keep death and birth records. So that's our housekeeping. We are like keeping things in order, making sure that everyone has the information that they really need. So within this first chapter of your handbook, it talks about the roles and responsibilities of you as the city council. And on the left side here, I pulled this out of an old DOLA presentation that you guys had actually many times with me, but also with Randy earlier this year. So your responsibility as a city council is to set the policy. You are the fiduciary oversight for the city. You ensure that we are staying on track within our budget and are spending appropriately. You use your enabling authority, which is found in the Colorado Revised Statute, to protect public interest. That is where the city of Salida's authority to do business comes from, because we're a statutory city. You hire staff, such as myself. You appoint boards, you provide general communication with us, and expectation is that you support us and we support you in the work that we do.
Just one thing I wanted to make here. One of the things I found most freeing for me, we live in a small town, and it's not at all uncommon for people to say, I want this my brother-in-law or my friend or whatever, like if there's a hiring decision going on. And it's why it's so important, like when that comes up, we have a professional staff that goes through all the HR protocols on that. But what I found is initially I was really uncomfortable when that came up. But I learned after a while that when that comes up, you just defer it back to staff. Our job is policy. The only hiring decisions we make are on the 3 of them, sitting up there. Other than that, it's all through Christie. And so it takes a lot off our plates. And the minute I took that off my plate, I was a lot happier.
I'm glad we make you happy, Dan. And we will talk about, there are legal implications to not staying in your lane and kind of going outside the bounds of what you're responsible for. So if nothing else, we want to keep you out of trouble. So send stuff to our way, because there is a legal component.
Personal liability, because you'd be acting outside of your authority, so CIRSA would not cover you, and you could be personally liable for acting outside your role. But it's really just to get back to ethics and fairness and the management. And if ever there was a hypothetical person that is not doing that job, then you speak to the person directly and say that, I'm not happy with how things are going in these departments, but you still are talking to the manager or the administrator.
Right. And we will cover that in a couple of slides, I think. So other responsibilities that you have as city council, you sit as the local liquor and marijuana licensing authority. Those lovely public hearings where Dan repeats himself multiple times.
Ad nauseum.
Ad nauseum. So you have the authority to hold hearings and impose sanctions after due process. And we're going to talk about due process later in this presentation as well. You also have the ability to sit on boards and commissions within the community. These can be either as a voting member or as an ex officio member. So we have Councilmember Stevens sits on the airport board as a voting member. We will be appointing someone to the Greater Salida Recreation Corporation Board tomorrow as an ex officio board member. There's also the Community Foundation Grant Review. So this is an opportunity for the council to be more engaged in the community that you serve. There is an expectation then that you are reporting back to the full council, primarily during council reports on what's going on in those different committees that you're sitting on as a representative of the Salida City Council. So statutory authority, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Salida is a statutory city, so we fall under Title 31, Article 4 of the Colorado Revised Statute. If you have trouble sleeping at night, feel free to pick up a copy of that. It is riveting. But to the point, council appoints 5 positions here in Salida: city administrator, city clerk, city attorney, municipal judge, and municipal prosecutor. Those are the employees that you have direct responsibility for. As you have seen, you review our contracts, we do our performance evaluations with you all. We report directly to the city council. All right, appointed staff. So I just touched on a couple of these here that are in the council handbook. We can include the other 3 if you would like to. It's interesting that it's silent on those, but that's okay. So the appointed staff that we'll talk about tonight, city administrator. So I currently serve as the chief administrative officer. I carry out the directives that you give to me and the rest of the staff. I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of the city in City Hall and at the other municipal buildings that we have in Salida. I'm your personnel director, so I'm responsible for the HR components across the city. I have the authority to appoint, supervise, terminate all staff that are not elected or appointed, right? So Bill reports to me, but Nina does not, okay? The city attorney, the office provides legal assistance to all of you for any legislative policies that you might bring forward. That position represents a city in any litigation or other proceedings. They prepare the legal documents. They let us know if anything from the court will impact the city of Salida, and they attend this regular meeting generally, and then any other meetings as necessary. Anything else?
If you could go back. So basically, our role is governed by you all, like for the first one is similar to administrator, to implement your policy goals. And then through what you tell the city administrator to do, that's also how it comes up if we're writing ordinances to implement that. And then also basically keep the city out of trouble or to keep you updated with state law, federal law, or court cases that may not follow the direct policy guidelines of you, but it's to tell you that you need to either follow that or these are the implications.
Excellent. Chapter 2, council and staff interactions. We really want to have a great relationship with the city council. And I think you have an excellent staff at City Hall who really wants to make sure that you all understand what we're working on, understand what we're hearing. We want to make you look good. We want to make sure that you get the information that you need and that we're using the resources that we have at our disposal as efficiently as possible. So sometimes people can take this as being kind of pigeonholed where you can only talk to me, right? Like I'm trying to bottleneck or keep information to myself or not let you talk to other people. But it really, by directing all information to me or to Nina, depending on what the topic is, it really helps us make sure that we're getting the right information out to you and that we are keeping track of the workload that we're doing. So again, I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations. It's really important that I understand what Bill's working on and what David's working on or Diesel. So if if you all need something and I know about it, I can direct it to the right person and I know that they're working on something so that you're getting the information that you need. So when we talk about council and staff interaction, it isn't to kind of put up a wall between the council and the rest of the staff. It's really to make sure that we are, coordinating, sharing information properly, using city resources properly, creating legal assurances that everybody is working in the place where they're supposed to be as well. So I hope that you don't take it as like you're not allowed to talk to other people. There is really a reason for kind of directing it through myself or Nina at this
And
point.
one way we explained to another city council where it was cutting a hard time getting through, especially with direction, like we explained a council member was directing a park supervisor, not even the director, to do something. And we said, don't you think it's confusing for that person that they have now 9 bosses, maybe 7 council members, their department head and their city administrator. If you look at it, that's another way to look at it, like, oh, that must be really confusing for your staff. And in that situation, I'm talking about direction, like telling them to do something. But it could be innocuous, like, oh, well, why aren't you doing this in the park? That's confusing for somebody who is just trying to work for the city and do their role. Like, oh, shoot, who's my boss? Is it Diesel? Is it Christie? Or is it all 7 of you?
And this is a large and complex organization. It's hard enough to manage the workload when it's getting to the right people in the right way. But when you throw this in there, and if all of a sudden people are calling David and Diesel and Bill, and it can become really unmanageable.
Again.
So I could still participate in small talk. I could still discuss like the Broncos and stuff.
Yes, the Broncos
Only
are
if
fine.
they're winning.
Okay, only if they're winning, of course. But
Or-
yeah,
yeah.
anything city related.
Absolutely. This is not to keep you away from city staff. Absolutely not. They are very likable people, as all of you. So.
So you can just
uh,
talk
yeah,
about anything else
You can, yes.
outside of
Are you
directing
talking about
city
the
stuff.
3 in the room or everybody?
Oh.
You gotta check.
Meh. So, yes, you can absolutely talk to city staff. This is just, if you go to the next slide, this is really kind of where we're looking at really ensuring that we have direction from the full council. So any policy or program modification coming directly to even me at this point is difficult because what Councilmember Pappenfort might find as being really important that we need to change in X policy, maybe Councilmember Martin is like, no, I like it just the way it is. So there are going to be instances like that where we need to have that discussion in the council chambers, in a public meeting. We talk about it a lot in the council reports, bringing something forward and ensuring that it is the will of this body to utilize staff time on something that might require some research or something else. Political support hopefully goes without saying. So refraining from soliciting any support from staff while they're at work, okay? If a staff member wants to help you with your next run for council, they can absolutely do that. Just they cannot spend work time on it. So we have to keep that separated.
So we can't have Bill do all our door knocking for us?
Not during office hours.
Not during office hours. He can, starting at 5:30 PM to 8 AM. Again, this, and Nina brought this up, avoid staff interactions that can be construed as trying to direct or shape any operations. Again, it can get really confusing for staff members to know who, because they will not say no to you, right? That no one would say, no, I'm not going to do that, but
And aren't
it does.
there HR implications too?
Yes. Mhm. Yeah. We want to make sure that all of the same information gets to each council member. So when we get an email, so I really appreciate it when one of you gets an email from a constituent, you send it to either me or Christy Jefferson so that we can send it out to the entire council. It's really important that the same information gets out to everyone so you all have an understanding of what we're getting. There's some information in your handbook about whistleblowers. So if, let's say Bill wants to complain about me, and he comes to Justin. Right, I know, but I don't know, you're kind of on my radar here lately. And he comes to Councilmember Critelli and wants to file a complaint. That complaint should go to the mayor, so the mayor can have, can understand what the next steps are in an investigation, and would most likely then be going to our city attorney.
And the process is set out in the handbook.
Yeah, that is.
So it's notwithstanding everything that we said about, following the proper procedure. Obviously, if there's someone who really needs to come with a complaint,
Exactly.
there's a process as well.
Yes. And then personnel, refraining from directing staff to avoid confusion and legal liabilities. So I know it can be difficult. Some of you are in positions where people come and talk to you a lot about what's happening at the city, and that's wonderful that they want to talk to you. It really, really is. Your safest course of action is to contact Christy. It really is. All right. Any questions about staff, council interactions, anything that's been bugging you the last few months? Nope. Okay, great. All right, meeting essentials. So, as you all are aware, you have basically 3 types of meetings. We have our regular meetings, which are our business meetings, right? That's where we want to get in, get the information, make decisions, and get out, right? So, we currently have those first and third Tuesdays. They start at 6. The council handbook does indicate that meetings need to end by 9 unless we have a majority vote. Work sessions, like this evening, first and third Mondays, starting at 6. No formal action can take place in a work session. This is an opportunity for dialogue, information sharing, getting feedback from the council, getting general direction from the council on what they'd like to see on a certain topic. And then we have special meetings, and those happen when something has come up that can't wait for the next regular meeting. You have the opportunity to call a special meeting. It does require a mayor and 3 council members to approve that, and 24-hour notice. So, prior to any meeting, you will receive an agenda and a packet.
That's amazing.
We are working, and we did it this time, except you guys didn't get these presentations. So we're working on it. We understand that you all getting the packets on Friday was really limiting. Sometimes they were 300 pages long, and there's a lot of information in those packets, and that didn't give you enough time to review it and ask questions of staff. So we want to help. We want to make things better for you. So our directive is to finalize agendas on the Tuesday prior to the next meeting. So we are getting everything to Christy on Tuesday. So we got everything to her last Tuesday to put the packets together. The email link was sent out to you all on Wednesday. We did have, I think, maybe one change in there, but it gave you an opportunity, at least, you had 2 full working days before the weekend to review information and hopefully, kind of have it sink in a little bit more, process a little bit more. You have opportunity to ask us questions. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions about something that's on the agenda. If you want additional information, if you want some clarification, I will pass it along to the right staff member. We want to make sure you all feel really prepared when you come in to these meetings.
And legal questions, please feel free to ask me as well. So please don't hesitate. We want to help you get prepared. And a lot of times people worry about, what about the notifying the public and just transparency. It's always better to ask us so that we can answer the questions, and then you can ask again, and we can include that in the presentation for all the public to hear and be prepared as well.
During your regular meetings, there will be public hearings, which we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes. And this section of the handbook also talks about the budget This council, this city, our fiscal year begins on January 1st and ends December 31st of every calendar year. Our budget that you just went through gives an estimate of revenues and expenditures and really sets the policy and philosophy of the city for the coming year. Chapter 4, City Council Meeting Procedures. The handbook, as I was putting this together, I realized that the handbook is a little bit out of order. And so I put the presentation together in a flow that I think made it a little better. So I might be bringing forward the handbook to you with some modifications in it, maybe at the beginning of the year. And you all can tell me if there's anything else you see that you would like to be addressed as well. So our meeting procedures, we start off with civility here. We don't read the invocation anymore, but you passed a resolution, just really prioritizing civility in your meetings. And we have the invocation posted on the website and on the TVs here at the beginning of each meeting because it still is extremely important to us that we are speaking in a civil tone. Our meetings are run via Bob's Rules of Order, right? We have a good procedure through there. Robert's Rules of Order is really, yeah. So we go with Bob's, which is
Abbreviated, easier to
We're not a
understand.
500-person assembly.
Exactly, yeah. 3 members and the mayor or 4 council members must be present in order for us to hold a regular meeting in which we would take action. So we need to have a full quorum here in order for us to vote on anything. Attendance within your handbook asks that if you're not able to attend a meeting, that you advise the clerk, the administrator, and the mayor in advance if you're able to. We do allow for 4 unexcused absences within a 12-month period. And if you hit more than 4, you can be asked to step down from your position. We haven't had that issue, so appreciate that. We do have, I didn't put it in this presentation, but we do have the remote participation policy as well. So there's another opportunity. If you're not here in person, you can attend remotely. The mayor or 2 council members can place an item on the agenda. So that's kind of what we get to when we talk about the council reports, when y'all bring something up and you ask for another council member to kind of put something on the agenda with you. The request should be made publicly. That's the ideal. Removal of an agenda item requires a 2/3 vote from the council. So if something, for some reason, has been either discussed or the council does not want to discuss it yet, it would take 2/3 of you to remove that from the agenda.
And just all of this has come through time from requests from council, and your consent is this is how you want to work things out. I want to explain the placing the agenda item from a practical standpoint. I've been in other cities where, somebody asks us not in a public meeting, and then we'll start an ordinance, let's say, and then we find out that 2 other people want to go a different way. Obviously, you could always make changes, but we want to get a general sense of, okay, this is the way you want us to start going before we spend a lot of time and resources. That's just another reason behind it.
So this is just a screenshot of what your agendas look like without any information on them, right? This is the run of the show. Next. Briefly, so the consent agenda allows you to approve several items with 1 vote. You're all aware that's one of the first things on your agenda. You all know you can remove an agenda item and move it under new business if you want to spend more time talking about it, and then just approve the balance of the consent agenda with 1 motion. We allow for citizen comment at the beginning of each meeting. This is an opportunity for you to hear from the public. Each speaker must be treated equitably, right? So we have in our handbook that you get 3 minutes to speak. If, for some reason, the chair of the council, the mayor, decided to give the first person 4 minutes to speak, everyone else would need to get 4 minutes. So it's really about being equitable throughout that process. Generally speaking, this is something that you all have talked about. It's a little awkward, I know, having people talk at you for 3 minutes and not being able to respond, right? And there's a good reason for that, getting in kind of a back and forth that doesn't really provide much to the meeting. So it can be difficult for individual council members to engage with the public that way in a public meeting. Right now, we have the responses that you all can make to public comment in your council report. So it's at the end of the meeting. People either have to stick around or tune back in to YouTube to hear if any of their comments have been addressed by you. Dan, Mayor Shore has an opportunity to note that the council can respond if they'd like, or I can correct the public record if I deem necessary. So there is an opportunity there if we see fit. Generally, we don't. We can address those comments made by citizens
No,
at a
I
later
like
date.
so much more encouraging people to stick around. Like, we'll get to that at the end of the meeting.
Right.
Because we're gonna be at this meeting this whole time, so you get to be too.
I know, but
Right?
they
Like,
don't.
I kinda like that. I kinda like that.
I know.
Encourage them.
I know.
Wait for the response after these
We've-
messages.
I know, and I talked to other communities about, how they really deal with it, and most of them just say, it is kind of what it is. One community put, I think their council reports right after public comments, but then you're kind of cutting off another kind of bulk of your meeting, so,
Some communities have the citizen comment towards the end as well.
good.
And then some communities, I think also I've seen it, Christy do it, if it's a very particular, information, Christy could say, give me your information, I'll have the appropriate department head get back to you not during the meeting, maybe the next week.
So we find out sometimes the information that's shared during public comments, it just needs a little education, back to the individual. So, did you have something?
Oh, I think waiting until the council report at the end and having it so separate can also like give council time to maybe just like de-escalate a little bit if it's something that's frustrating, I think that's good for us
Okay,
as humans.
great. I know, it's awkward, but it's kind of where we are.
And I wouldn't want to change the citizen comment from early in the meeting. That's how it's always been done. Let them come in, have their say, and go home and have their steak, whatever.
And I would also say that I make a habit of telling people if they feel like they need more time, they can reach out to me. And I've been doing that now for 3 years.
Yeah.
And one time has someone reached out to me, so,
They mostly feel like they have enough time.
yeah.
Yeah, people want to feel heard, so I think that.
What was
as
that?
long as- Exactly. All right, what else is on our agenda? Reports. So each council member has an opportunity to give a report at the end of the meeting. Should include updates on boards and committees that you are involved in. Our city treasurer also reports out on the budget and sales tax. You have a department update report as well. And obviously, for each of those agenda items, a staff member is creating a report, a council action form for you to review. Executive session, it must be voted on by 2/3 of the city council to enter into. It is a very limited scope per the Colorado Revised Statute, and no formal action can be taken, right? The council gives us direction, and we come out of executive session and are given the formal direction if necessary.
Has the council ever voted to not go into executive session?
Bless
Because
you.
It doesn't feel like that's an option, really.
It is, in my 7 years in Salida, I haven't seen it, but in some other communities, I have seen it. So then
Does it just go forward to the next meeting?
It depends on the situation. So you go into executive session because it's a real reason to protect the city from not being open. Like if you're doing a real estate transaction, you don't want to share, like, this is going to be our greatest and best offer. So then when, in the situations that I've seen that people voted no, it's like, okay, well now we're not going to speak about this publicly. So you find different ways. Maybe it's a memo, or maybe it's not going forward with that business, or maybe it's not getting that advice. But it makes sense if you feel like it's warranted to go into it. You could always, when you get into executive session, say, oh, no, this is not what we said we were going to speak about, that there's a process for that. So I would recommend if your staff's, you have good staff, if we're putting it on the agenda, it's for a reason. But I have seen people, some people vote against, and the 2/3 is a statutory requirement, and you need 2/3 of the body as a whole, which is 5 out of 7.
And I've seen, so personnel matters are a separate kind of category of executive session, I guess. So the person, let's say you were going to talk about my contract and you wanted to go into executive session to talk about my contract, I could say, no, I don't want you to go into executive session. We're going to have the discussion in public.
And I've seen that happen too. It's kind of silly for the person because then everyone could hear, especially if but I've seen it in that situation too, where the person thinks they're being more clever versus having it in private. But, yeah,
I don't think anyone's ever voted against going.
not
into
here,
No, not.
not last 7 years.
I was curious for executive sessions. When I was running for treasurer last election season, I was curious as to why the treasurer isn't in the executive sessions for if there's a fiscal impact. I just don't know.
Do you want me to say it? Yep. Yeah, so in the statute, executive session is the city council executive session. So this is your business meeting, the city council. You only can go into executive session under very limited circumstances. Again, that would preserve the openness, preserve the protection of the city. It's for you to talk in private. The city treasurer, just like any other elected position, is not a member of the city council. It's your executive session. For financial impact, you have your finance director if you want to have, because they're the ones who have lived and breathed with the financial impact. But it's very important when you go to executive session that it's as limited as possible, that it's you and only the necessary staff. But it is your executive session at the city council meeting, and you are the ones voting, and it's your executive session. You could so yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm like, well, we're the only ones who.
Because you hold the privilege, so anyone you bring into you have to be very cautious that everyone, and it's not anything personal to a person, but like if let's think you could think of hypothetically that position or anyone else that you bring into the executive session does not understand that the privilege that is held, and you hold that privilege on behalf of the city, not on yourselves, that to be private, confidential, and to only protect the interests of the city, and that's the only reason why you go into executive session in those limited amount of circumstances.
Thank you.
Great. Chapter 5, conflicts of interest.
So this is in your handbook, but it also comes from mostly from statutory and also the Constitution. So you're here, and none of you have, it's funny, Jeff Wilson, my partner, he always says that this is kind of like common sense for an ethical, just a normal person. Like, you don't have to be, you're just a normal ethical, non-ethical person. It comes easy to you. You're here for the common good for the city. You're not here for your private interest. You're not here, you didn't run for council so you can get a private contract for your private company. These things, it's almost like when we teach these go over this slide, it's either if you didn't care you wouldn't listen, but all of you do care, and it just comes naturally to you. But it's just again, it comes from the Constitution, statute, and it's also in your handbook. So again, personal interest. When you make a decision, if there's something that is related to your immediate family members or your pecuniary or business interest, you're going to recuse yourself, because you don't want to be even part of the decision that got that contract or that employment. It's not appropriate for you to apply for a position unless you step down from the council. Again, just to keep that, you would even just think of what you want the people to perceive. It's again, this comes naturally. Like, you wouldn't want any of your neighbors to think you're doing something for your own personal benefit. And then just generally your fiduciaries with the city's assets. So financially, you want to make sure you make the right decision for these different contracts and arrangements, not based on your personal, but what's best for the city. And again, this comes naturally to all of you, but it's just a good reminder.
Yeah, two quick thoughts on this. One is that a question I always ask myself is if this were to show up on the front page of tomorrow's paper, how would you feel? And if the answer is not so good, that's a really good litmus test. The other thing is, Nina's available. If you have any questions on anything, run it by her. I mean, I had a situation not too long ago where someone came before council that had donated to a campaign and helped me with the campaign. And, you know, I probably could, there probably was enough wiggle room that I could have been in there, but the perception of impropriety, I recuse myself.
And any of my emails, that phone number is my cell phone number. Call me anytime. You could email me and say, call me at this time. A lot of you have, and it's a lot of those situations are, yeah, and it's because you care. You want to make sure the perception is not there, or also you don't want the city's decisions to be tarnished, because if you make a decision, if you vote for something where there is a conflict of interest, that decision of city council is void. It could be voided. So it's like, it's not just for yourself. It could be held invalid. And especially if it's a close vote, think about what could happen.
For like the conflicts of interest, if we do recuse ourselves, I know in the past, Mr. Mayor has excused himself from the room completely. And like I stayed when we discussed the flour mill. I know Councilmember Stevens has stayed when we've discussed things that he recused himself from. I just don't know if there's a standard that we should be following.
Do we have like a timeout room or?
I was in it.
I mean, I personally believe it's still important to sit in on the conversation. You just don't have the ability to vote or to give input.
Yeah, and it is facts specific. So I understand the mayor because he's running the meeting, and also in these circumstances, you are of the type, both of you, that you are just really sitting and listening. I would say in other situations, there are those strong personalities that might be like, how are you gonna vote? Yeah, how are you gonna vote? That's not any of you. So it's in the municipal like lawyer field, like some people say like, it always has to be this way, it always has to be this way. I think it's fact specific, which is why I didn't say, well, you have to leave the room. It's really like, you have to make sure that it's not even sense that you're like, just look straight ahead, you're not even trying to.
No facial expressions.
Poker face.
No hand movements, yeah.
Like, did everyone watch The Godfather where they fly in the grandfather and he's sitting in trial so the witness doesn't, but you're not that kind of person. But I have worked for councils where there is that type of person, and it's like, or even if you feel like someone is going to criticize you in a certain circumstance that you want to leave the room. But yeah, as long as you're totally quiet. Yeah, again, not me. I'm not making not like, no, that's not true when the person's speaking, which again, none of you do, but I've seen this. Then I feel it's fine because you're not tarnishing the council. You're not trying to push the council to vote a certain way. In certain circumstances, the council might say, listen, it's nothing personal, but we would like, if you're able to leave the room. So, not to be like a lawyer, it depends, but I'm just trying to explain how I would advise in these different circumstances. Does that make sense?
Are we there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Open meetings law. So these are called the sunshine laws. Very important, and you all try to you do all follow them, and also try to follow them. So where it comes up a lot is, so obviously you all know you have a good city clerk. She posts the meeting. She's following the open meeting laws.
Yeah, we have a great city clerk.
Yes, you have an amazing city clerk. But when these questions come up is, what else is a meeting? So a meeting can be just 3 or more of you talking about public business. So that could be an email, that could be a text string, group chat, Facebook group messenger. And so you could do all those things, but don't talk about public business. So actually the red box is a quote from, not take away the word pending, that's a typo from Nina, but the rest of it is a quote from a 2021 bill where they said emails about like, well, can we all meet for this time, or can we reschedule, or, non-substantive things does not violate the open meetings law. So the state legislature wants to make that clear. As long as you're not talking about public business, you could, it's good just to not email, but like, let's say you're just like, oh, is it gonna rain? I'm gonna bring my umbrella, something, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of things that are not public business.
Like, we've been to conferences before and trying to set up dinner. And
Yes,
we'll
that's a
text and be
better-
like, do you want to meet at this restaurant at
Right.
7 o'clock for dinner, there are 12 of
That
us.
does not violate the
That's
open
fine.
meetings law, because you're not talking about public business. And public business is defined in the teal top right, that comes from the open meetings law. So, and it's also not chance meeting. So Jeff Wilson has told me that came up when some people were trying to play gotcha, like if there's a funeral, God forbid, a couple years ago we had it, and it's not like, oh, I have to think of only 3 of us attending, no. Or a holiday potluck, where everyone knows is part of a community organization. It's not like someone can be like, oh, gotcha, just make sure you don't talk about public business. You are allowed to have a small community and all be at FitBark at the same time.
I just want to say that if, like, I'm at a social event and 2 of you come up and want to talk about public business, it's not going to land well.
Well, that too.
I'm going to be like, no.
Shut down.
And the yellow is just things not to do, so don't text each other during a meeting, because, again, that should be public. If we're at a council meeting, everyone has the right to hear what you're saying. I wouldn't, definitely not text applicants and that kind of thing. Maybe to text one of us about something procedurally, like if the mayor's like, I heard someone can't hear, that's fine. And then executive session, again, that's an exception to the open meetings law. So the purpose of is transparency, that everyone could hear, see how the government, they don't always get to speak, but they could hear how the government's making decisions. The public policy reason for the exception is that the public interest is served more when certain topics are spoken in private. And the example I gave before is a real estate purchase. You actually are saving the taxpayers money if you don't say in public meeting, well, we would want to go for 500,000, but we'll go up to 1.1 million. Obviously the person could hear that. So that's just like a very basic example of, yes, transparency is important, but the public business and the public assets that you're protecting are protected and safeguarded more if you're going to executive session. You go into it very infrequently. There's only 6 bases that are all listed in statute. We have a script for a reason. Most of the cities follow it. Is just to it's particular because we only want to go into executive session in except very rare exceptions, and we want to make sure otherwise we're keeping things open, and if we're not, it's to serve the public interest. Does that make sense?
Chapter 7.
Oh,
You
fun
weren't
stuff.
reading the whole thing. That was a question.
What'd you say? I
That
didn't
was a
hear.
question.
No, but I didn't hear.
I thought you weren't reading the whole thing.
All 11?
All 11.
Yeah.
We're not, this is the last one.
Oh, yay. Thank you.
Not that we're not totally with you.
Oh, my gosh.
There are
Completely
No, there's a
still
test after this.
100%.
There is a test after this at your meeting tomorrow. So I'm
Legislative-
expecting everybody to know exactly what to do tomorrow.
Fully soaking it all in.
9, 10, and 11 on your own.
That's right.
So quasi-judicial, I try to remind all of my planning commissions and all of my city councils at least annually, because it is really important. And I try to explain what's quasi-judicial by what it's not. So legislative is most of what you do. You're amending a code, you're passing a resolution that is affecting the whole, the city as a whole or a portion of the city. Board applications, amending the code, I have it there. Quasi-judicial is when you're applying the code that already exists, and you're applying that policy to a specific individual, a specific property, or property interest. So it's all those, everything other than text amendments that Bill spoke about. It's also liquor license, because that is one person's really livelihood there. That's their property interest. And it doesn't mean you have to approve all these applications, but it means that you have to give them due process and fairness.
Right, so we just wanted to talk, the legislative public hearing is very different from a quasi-judicial public hearing. Legislatively, you want everybody to speak, you're wanting that input. All of the comments from the public are gonna make better public policy. So that's kind of a very open part of the process. Christie? Right, quasi-judicial is very different because there are much more strict rules around quasi judicial, starting with ex parte communication.
Yeah, so the reason why we want to keep quasi-judicial is you're acting as the judge. Again, you're applying the already existing code to somebody's property interest, and that has origins in the United States Constitution, the 14th Amendment, not taking away someone's property without due process of law. So the ways to keep hearing, one of the ways to keep the hearing impartial is not to have ex parte communication. And ex parte is someone talking to you outside the context of the hearing. So they come up to you in the grocery store or the restaurant, or just, walking down by the river, and if they start talking to you about a quasi-judicial matter, what you should say is, I really want your input to be heard by the entire council. We have a public hearing, and we want you to make sure you either attend, or if you can't attend, write the city clerk, email us all, it'll be in the packet. I want it to be considered, so that it's fair, and also it's so that it doesn't look like someone's trying to influence you. So obviously the person who's just a neighbor or is probably just trying to talk to you because they're interested. But it could be also a developer that you might know too. You have to say, no, I'm sorry. You have to come in front of the council as a whole. This is similar to if you were to go to court and the judge was in front of you, you wouldn't want to hear that the other side has spoken to the judge, taken him to golf or lunch another day. That's an extreme example, but that's why, again, the perception that these hearings are fair is important.
Next.
Oh, there we go. It's important because depriving due process of law.
I'll show you what the next slide
No, I
is.
know what it says. I wrote all this.
She didn't put it
I
together,
wrote all this. I
think.
usually just have that verse. But so in addition to the Constitution, people's rights being important, it's also so everyone could hear how you're making the decision. So that could be the applicant, that could be a neighbor, that could be just an interested resident. They could understand how you made your decision because they read the packet, or they had the right to read the packet. They heard the testimony. They heard the applicant's presentation. They heard the staff presentation. They hear you all talking about why you're going to make a certain decision, and then you make the decision. So it's all wrapped in a little bow that it's in the confines of the public hearing. And it's also to make sure that you're unbiased. So again, if you have a conflict of interest, or we spoke about that, you could recuse yourself, but everyone who's still there, you haven't heard about it, or you've told people, no, come to the hearing. You haven't prejudged yourself. You haven't made your decision beforehand, and everyone's seeing the unbiased decision. And then final decisions, if anyone's adversely affected, they can be appealed to the district court. And the reason why that's important is what I just said is that everything is in this nice little bow, which is the packet and the audio of what you said and everything that you have heard. A judge will look at that, and judges are very hesitant to question a local decision. They only will do that if you're arbitrary and capricious. So that's why I'm here to help you just make sure your procedures are fair, and even that they are perceived to be fair in addition to being fair, because you have that right to make those decisions. But again, we just want fairness, which all these things that we're talking about, they really relate back to general fairness. If somebody never read these slides and they're sitting here listening to your decision, and they hear that you made most of your decision already because you were talking, at Tony's beforehand, and you just kind of had your decision made, they would just say, that's unfair. So again, these are, if you think about it, are common sense and what is truly fair. So that's why I'm here to remind you. I find myself, unlike the conflict of interest, which is totally obvious, this I do need to, step in and remind you, because it is hard. It's a small town, right? And emotions come, and then there's a property that nobody wants what could be done, even though the land use code provides. I'm just there to remind you to follow the fair process, because you all are trying to do the right thing, but your elected people are screaming at you. I'm here to remind you, in quasi-judicial, you're sitting as a judge.
And when you get into those situations where someone comes up, I find it really liberating to be able to say, this is quasi-judicial, we can't have these types of conversations, it all has to happen in the public hearing, and this safeguards you as well. And
I think that was one of the reasons, I know Nina was really happy that we don't do reflective listening in the quasi-judicial
What I'm hearing
public
you say.
hearing, is because it can go out, it had the potential of going outside of just repeating back what people said. So you have these slides, we talk about impartiality and just how really, really important it is. Ex parte communication, not prejudging a decision, conflict of interest that Nina's already talked about. And then the next.
The Sweeties, shout out on that.
The what?
So I have these, I have these slides, and I change that like word in different, for all the different cities, and it's always like my favorite like coffee shop or lunch shop in Woodland Park, it's Joni's, and Avon, it's Loaded Joe's.
See you in Sweeties.
Oh yeah, I love it.
You gotta
She's
come
not
inside.
feeling-
And when my husband's here, we go on the second floor. He loves that place for brunch.
She's not feeling the love, Nina.
It's not.
So how do you make sure that you're staying impartial? You can silently ask yourself these questions, and then to Councilmember Martin's point, recusal is one option for council, but also disclosing on the record, hey, I was at the grocery store and the neighbor of this development came up to me, wanted to start talking to me about it. I told them that I couldn't talk to them. I don't feel that that anything has been compromised. I feel comfortable sitting here. So
I still feel I could decide the case fairly, impartially. And it does say, ask yourself these questions. Definitely call me if you have any question. And sometimes I've been in cases where it's very contentious and people are questioning a person. Well, you shouldn't vote on it because you attend that church. And people have asked me, can you ask these questions to me before the public hearing in public? And I would only do that if you asked me to. But I have done that before. So then the person could kind of clear their name, like, no, I still could decide the case fairly, even though my cousin's, baseball coach is the applicant, and then you explain it. So, and I've seen you guys do that too. You've said, I'm part of the, I don't know, I once went to this nonprofit party, but I still feel like I could be fair. I'm not on the board. I don't financially benefit, that sort of thing. And then the public hears, and you want to do that too. Sometimes you're like, oh, can I? It's always a good idea, if you want to share that.
and if you don't know, ask Nina.
Always ask me. Yeah.
This is what a public hearing looks like when we're sitting here. I stole this from Nina.
Yes. Change the colors. You all do this, but it's just good to reiterate. In addition to everything we just said, it's also to make sure everyone felt it was fair and appreciated. Now, there's always going to be that 5% of people who feel a decision's only fair if it went the way that they wanted to. We're not talking about that person. But if a person, even if they disagree with you, they sat there, they heard you listen to everyone, you weren't outside the room, you were focused on everyone who was in front of you, which you guys do all a good job because you're courteous people. But you listened. You heard the applicant speak, you heard all the public speak, you asked good questions, you brought up during deliberation, I always say think out loud, kind of say, yeah, we heard the 5 people who spoke for the public, but the other people who said this, that kind of relates to the code more, and we heard the applicant, and we heard, don't be shy. And in fact, I encourage you during quasi-judicial public hearings to say all that out loud. So again, the public could say, I don't want them to go that way, but I see they kind of had to because they looked at the code, these are the factors, and this is how they made their decision. And they leave feeling not only listened to, but also that it was fair. And I know that's your goal as a council. Again, the vast majority of people are going to say, even if it didn't go my way, they explained why they made their decision. And then the applicant does have a right, because they're the ones in front of you. They're the ones who are, again, you don't have to accept or approve their application if the code doesn't require it, but they have a right to make their presentation. They have a right to bring witnesses, and they also have a right to rebut or respond if they feel fit, just to have everything heard. So if 10 people from the public comment said the same thing and they want to say, I just want to clarify, you have to give them that right because they want to clarify factually, this was said, but this is my response. And again, you can deny. A lot of times I give this training, people go, oh no, I can't deny. No, you can definitely deny if anything in the code is not complied with. Especially in land use applications, there are factors, there are criteria. You're applying, again, the already existing criteria to what's in front of you and what you've heard. It is not appropriate to deny if you say, hey, developer, I want you to give 75% affordable housing, even though your code requires 25%. And they say, well, no, I can't do that. And if that's your only reason for denying, you can't do that. That's not fair. Your personal reason that you're like, you know what? I walked by that road for 20 years, and I just always thought that property should be used for this purpose. That's frankly irrelevant, right? Because the code allowed them to do certain things. I mean, not like your opinions aren't, but like you can't make a decision based on it. I've seen it all, believe me, that's why I bring it up. You know, and you just think, that property should only be used for a grocery store. It shouldn't be used for anything else. Well, does the code permit them to use it for other things? And then I've seen it in density. If they're permitted for the density that they're requesting in the code, and the code allows it, and you're gonna deny them for another reason, just because you don't want the density, you can't do that either. You gotta really follow what the code said. If you didn't want that area, for that area of the city to be developed in that way, that should have been done in the comprehensive plan and the land use code. Because again, the person is opening your code, and they're seeing what they can do, and it's not fair to go outside that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Why you can deny something and why you can't? You can do whatever you want, by the way, but why I advise strongly. And then the conditions. So you have three choices. You're either approving, denying, or you're approving with conditions. Usually that's the three choices when a quasi-judicial hearing's in front of you. So there are a lot of conditions. Something might have came up, and the person did volunteer it, and they're like, you know what? I don't have to do this, but I heard 10 citizens say they want to be screened from this use, and I'm going to put it on the record, I'm going to commit to, adding 10 trees. You could make that a condition. And then just the other things that are objective, that are in the code somehow, again, technical requirements, maintenance of common elements. If there's a requirement in the code and you want to make sure, I've seen it sometimes where it's, going to be a subdivision and then maybe taken care of by an HOA. You want to put that in a condition that we want to make sure that these responsibilities continue to run. Your staff recommends good conditions a lot of times. Ask them questions why they put that there, but it doesn't mean you can't add to it, but that's good. And I've also seen planning commission even add to those conditions, and then they come in front of you. Oh, here's unacceptable, when I said density, like, I'm gonna approve this, but you only could build 5 units, not 10. Well, if the zoning allows it, you can't put that condition on. Or, my favorite color is purple. This is approved as long as you paint every single house purple. If you have, when you add architectural standards, where you guys don't have any right now, I was at a hearing in Salida a couple years ago, and people wanted to do that. I had to jump in. The code doesn't provide the house in where it was not that it was a larger property, but it doesn't. Your code does not allow you to require that the brick be a certain material. If you want that, some communities have that. But you'd have to put that in your code before the applicant came.
Basically, it's just, if it's.
I mean, like Cherry Hills, for example.
Then it doesn't
Right,
qualify.
right. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Look at your code. And the staff report will explain, it's a good guideline. It doesn't mean you're listening to everything the staff says, but the staff is gonna outline, these are the 4 criteria. So that it's all there for you to then use your own judgment. Okay, well, I saw the 4 criteria, I heard what people said, I heard the applicant said. Again, objective, not just on a whim. What's in the code?
Ideally.
So then after you've heard all of that, you take action, right? That is your purpose here. So staff writes out the motion for you so that you have that in front of you as well. Throughout that public hearing process, however, if you are setting conditions or, you really want to use this as an opportunity to present the findings of why you're approving something or why you would be denying it, it's part of the public record. And it really lays out for both the applicant and the staff and the public what you are deciding to do and why you're deciding to do it.
I think it's really transparent just to give your rationale for why you're for or against something.
Right,
'Cause it's
right.
all part of the record.
Yeah, during that
And moving back to
deliberation.
the code or, whatever other policy you are working from.
Yeah.
That's it. See? Woohoo. Did not do
Not
all
all
of
the
them.
chapters.
Is that in the code?
It
Yeah.
should be.
Yeah.
Questions, comments?
Are you awake? Feeling good about your job still?
Good tag team.
Okay,
No,
good.
this was a good refresher.
All right, we'll
Appreciate it.
send the presentation out to everyone with a couple other things this week. Okay?
Thank you. I know this was a lot of work, so thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And anything else you want us to go over more, you could always ask us in the future.
We'll ask something when our brains aren't numb.
When you, yeah.
We'll go over chapter 11.
We'll go over chapter 11 next time.
We can do a individual meeting for Elisa,
Exactly.
because I'm not going.